Thank you, each of you who are here with us tonight. We appreciate the gift of your time and your expertise. And maybe we can just start by having you introduce yourselves. And Kate, maybe tell us what you do and how you're bringing solutions to Whatcom County. Sure, whatever works.
Well, hi, I'm Kate Blystone. I'm Program Director at Resources for Sustainable Communities. How many of you have heard of us? Yeah, that's good. I like it. But before I came to work for Resources, I worked for FutureWise for a time, and I've also worked for Whatcom County Planning and Development Services. So any questions you have about this film tonight related to planning or any efforts that we can make on the planning, and you can direct me, and I'll try to answer them for you.
Yes, and I'm Randy Honcoop, lifelong citizen of the county here, up in the North County, grew up on a dairy farm. I've been in raspberry production now for 28 years, I believe. Yeah, our industry, of course, is a machine harvest for processing industry, and I am currently one of the smallest raspberry growers at about 45 or 50 acres of raspberries. I also sit on the board of directors of the Ag District Coalition, which is an effort by some of us farmers to get the agricultural community, I guess, to work together, to organize itself, and become more of a responsible partner or player in the community for addressing especially issues with water, both on the supply side and quality, and also on the drainage side. That's one of the hats I wear, and I really do enjoy being more involved with the community, and thank you for this opportunity.
Well, I'm Robin Matthews, and I'm the director of the Institute for Watershed Studies at Western Washington University, and I'm also a professor in Huxley College of the Environment. Probably some of you are familiar with the work that the Institute does on Lake Whatcom. I've been involved in studying the water quality of Lake Whatcom since the mid-1980s and publish an annual report on that. I did want to mention that that's not the only thing that I do. One of the things that I'm very proud of is that the Institute provides as a public service summer monitoring of water quality in somewhere between 50 and 70 lakes. And you can find those lakes on our website. We have nice photo galleries and so on. So we're involved in lots of different watershed projects. I teach classes. Right now I'm teaching the slime class, a freshwater class on algae in Northwest Washington lakes. Get my students, they really laugh because everything's slimy and stinky. That is what just totally excites me. If you have slime, bring it to me.
Hi, I'm Colleen Mitchell. I'm a civil engineer and project manager with 2020 Engineering here in town. We work on both private and public sector projects, specializing in green stormwater infrastructure, as well as water reuse projects, natural wastewater treatment. We try to think of every water source as a resource, whether it's coming straight from the tap clean, whether it's coming from the rain, whether it's coming from the drains. However, we can use and reuse that water, get it back into our aquifers so that it can be reused again. It's kind of interesting listening to the San Antonio talk about how the Riverwalk was just, treated sewage. Well, isn't all water just treated sewage, right? We have no new water being developed every day, so it's funny to kind of have those conversations with people, but typically we work in the Bellingham and Seattle area, sometimes out in the San Juan Islands, but for the most part Washington and Oregon. And been able to work on a few projects around town here that I want to talk about tonight, but I'm just interested to hear what you guys have to ask as well. So.
Thank you, Colleen. My name's Jon Hutchings. I'm with the City of Bellingham. I'm responsible for the natural resource programs with a great cohort of people that includes Claire Fogelsong. I see him sitting right in front of me. I have the privilege to come up to this part of the world from one of those arid climates that you saw in this film tonight, and you think we got problems here. Those folks have a lot to think about down there. But in contemplating this discussion this evening, I took a little bit of time to go to waterblues.org and look at some of the little vignettes that they put together that sort of support the storyline that they're telling. And it was pretty inspiring, particularly one gentleman whose quote was, "Change comes one effort at a time." And I think the fact that we're all here tonight gives some credence to that, and I look very forward to the discussion.
Well, Jon, if you could hold the mic for a second longer. When you and I were standing out in the lobby, you said that you wanted to give a perspective to the people who are here in the audience, that over the course of 20 years, we haven't stood still and we haven't moved backward, we've actually moved forward. Can you tell us a little bit about your observation?
Yeah, I sure can. If you take a look at sort of the history of environmental work that has been done over the course of history, we're a long way in scope and in time, and in fact in distance from the likes of the Cuyahoga River and the Love Canal in New York, from perhaps the Owens Valley in California and that whole debacle. We're far removed today from the disruption that those kinds of environmental disasters foisted on folks at that time in history. And a lot has been done over the course of time. It was those first environmental disasters that I mentioned, that inspired the EPA, that inspired the Clean Water Act, that inspired liability being placed on the owners of the disasters themselves. Those sorts of changes didn't come very easily, and they took quite a bit of disruption to get that far. Since then, even since I've been in this community these last 7 years or so, I've seen a great acceleration in the amount of work that's being done by the governments, by the community as a whole, by the nonprofits. And to me, that's the vantage point from which we ought to be looking forward. We ought to feel fairly optimistic. Not perhaps so much about what the fate of humanity is on the face of the earth in the long term, but rather focus on what we know we can change. And I think there is good reason to be optimistic about that.
Well, while I personally have questions for everyone who's on the panel, I wanted to actually make this an opportunity for each of you to ask your questions. If you can stand up and ask them as loudly as you can, we're going to try to make sure that it's caught by our videographer, and if you need help with a microphone, we'll try to get you a mic.
Hi, my name is Alex McLean. I'm a founder of Bellingham Green Roofs, which is an informational website. And my general question is, and I don't mean to be combative, but basically it seems to me that Bellingham's green roof acreage is at a dead standstill. We haven't installed any green roofs here, whereas other big cities across the country have very active green roof programs. In the film tonight, they mentioned Portland, which has installed over 350 green roofs. Washington, D.C., New York City, Chicago, they all actually pay an incentive to install green roofs to help our stormwater. Whereas Bellingham has a very minor one-time payment that comes out of the stormwater impact fee, and precisely 0 people have taken up that opportunity in the past 4 years. So if you have any ideas on how to push green roofs or stormwater mitigation into the private sector, I'd be curious to hear.
Well, I think that's an excellent question. And so if the panelists, Jon, maybe starting with you, and then moving right down the line.
Yeah, there are a whole suite of management practices and investments that people are, of course, encouraged to to roll into new development, elements of new development, elements of redevelopment, and then as we have experienced with the Lake Whatcom Homeowner Incentive Program, into smaller residential applications. And just like any other community, we've got to learn to walk before we can run. And the scope of those incentive programs needs to find some purchase and the appropriate acceptance throughout the community, and there has to be a demand for it. And so the idea behind the likes of the homeowner incentive program in Lake Whatcom and some of the demonstrations that you see, particularly around those green roofs with the Light Catcher Museum and the like, is to demonstrate that those can be part of the design elements. I don't actually have any personal experience with green roofs being applied elsewhere in the community. Colleen, do you know?
But I bet Colleen could add some to this conversation. Colleen, what can we do to help inspire people to start thinking about green roofs and help move this forward in our community?
Well, I think John's right. You know, getting the word out there, letting people know that this isn't something that no one's done before or that, you know, can't be done in our community, having people understand that it is possible and that it does have real benefits. I think, you know, as far as low impact development goes, there are a lot of different management practices that you can use. Typically, they're engineers that are trying to implement them, and a lot of times engineers are used to doing things a certain way. And so being able to look at things differently and manage the impacts as close to the source as possible, green roofs make total sense. There are different types of green roofs, as you're well aware, I'm sure. Different thicknesses, different planting mediums, you know, different habitat benefits beyond stormwater, creating amenities for the community. You know, I think one of the reasons that they're so successful in other cities, one is the stormwater benefit, but it's also because people don't have as many green spaces at their fingertips, and to be able to have that additional roof area as a resource that people can use and go out and enjoy, I think, you know, from a developer's standpoint, that's marketable and that's profitable. And so I think from the dollars and cents, that's where some of the decisions are being made. It also provides a really good insulation value, especially in cooling heavy climates. We certainly still benefit from it in warming heavy climates, but maybe not as financially as much. But I think just, you know, realizing that it's an asset and showcasing them in the community. I think the Light Catcher is one of the best examples we have in town. I know of a few other small installations, but I think you're right. We really haven't seen them implemented to the full extent that we could. You know, the Washington State Department of Ecology has standards for the amount of stormwater benefit you're providing from that green roof. And so it's already built into the toolbox that they're giving us to work with. And I think that we need to encourage our designers to look at those tools and implement them as a whole suite and not just look at single BMPs, you know. I think a lot of times we look at a parking lot and say, okay, how can we mitigate the stormwater here? Well, it's all one system. Everything's connected, and we need to be able to be looking at each impact differently and how we can address each at the very source. So.
Kate has something to add to this question also.
Well, it's just kind of from a big picture perspective. Like I said earlier, I'm a planner, so my background is in long range planning, and upcoming for the city and for all of the small cities and the county are all going through their comprehensive plan update process. And in that comprehensive plan, that's the foundation for everything that we do in our community, all the regulations, everything, our path forward for the next 20 years. And infusing some of this stuff like green roofs and green infrastructure into our comprehensive plans could make a world of difference as to how we proceed in the next 20 years.
And so Annette was just telling me that if you'd like some more information about green roofs, out in the lobby, there's a place to sign up and you will be able to receive that information. And so everything can start here and start with the individual. Who else has a question? So the question, if you couldn't hear it, has to do with the water plant that's just been rebuilt in Bellingham, whether or not we did a good job or whether we missed some opportunities in that process. Which of you would like to speak to that? Looks like that's got John's name on it again.
Yes, and I'm probably going to disappoint you because my history doesn't dig deep enough into the into the water plant debate. But I think this might be a good opportunity to recognize that, single-purpose governments, whether they be like a utility or whether they be a particular group within a government, are often set up to do a single thing. Whether it be treat wastewater, whether it be deliver clean drinking water to a large population, whether it be stormwater management and those sorts of things. And one of the recurring conversations that's happening in the water industry today is the recognition that those single-purpose thinking may not be serving us as well as it ought or could be. The idea being that there are some institutional barriers that need to be broken down between those different purposes, and in order to be able to focus on these broader, longer-term issues, be able to look at the economic, the social, and the environmental sides of an issue. And I know at the City of Bellingham we've been having quite a discussion about how to do that, and that within Public Works, I know that there have been steps already taken to try and break some of these silos down and ensure that those conversations are happening. And it's not quite as easy as it sounds, because every responsible individual, for example, the superintendent of the water utility, has a very clear mandate. And should he fail in delivering that clean water for a reasonable price to the consumers, we wouldn't be talking to him for very much longer. And the same thing goes for the stormwater manager. If he somehow failed to meet the standards for the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System and exposed the city to a lawsuit around that, he would also be looking for another job. So there's a lot of motivation, a lot of incentive to stay very, very focused on your main business. Somehow we've got to make it safe for folks to have conversations across those boundaries. So I'm very sorry that I couldn't answer your question directly.
But I think Dr. Matthews has something to add, and maybe she can give us some specifics.
Well, I'm also not able to answer about the updates that have occurred recently, but I quite often get questions about the proposed updates to the water treatment facility that the city is looking at right now. And they relate to removing algae from the feed water that will be coming through the filter. And it's an interesting dilemma, because I often get the conversation going with people saying, well, if we spend huge amounts of money to pre-treat the water so we take away the urgency to clean up the lake, won't that affect the rate at which we have to address cleaning up the lake? And the short answer is no, because there's a legal obligation to continue working on cleaning up Lake Whatcom. It's a long-term goal. It took us a long time to get to where the algae levels in the lake were increasing. It's going to take a long time to get back down. But you have, as the utility has an immediate need to ensure that there is a sufficient water supply. And what has been happening in the lake over the past 30 years that I've been working on it is this slow but regular increase in the concentration of my favorite organism, algae. It's not a toxic kind of algae. It's not normally a dangerous kind of algae, but it certainly is a sticky kind of algae. And it's got long fibers, and it's got stickiness, and it forms almost a fiberglass-like mat on the top of the filters, which means that the water can't get through right at the time when you need the water to get through, summertime, when there's a lot of droughts, when you have to worry about fire suppression and so on. So the city has this immediate need, and they will be addressing that. I don't know all of the details, but if they go with the system that I assisted in evaluating, they're going to use a very innovative and low chemical treatment where they will be bubbling water through the system, which will nicely float the algae off that they can remove. It's actually a very excellent way to pre-treat the water. Unfortunately, it would have saved us all a whole lot of money if we had kept the lake clean to begin with.
That almost answers the question, I think. Thank you. Who else has a question for us? Yes, sir.
My question relates to one of the contracts that they just signed.
They who?
They being the Public Utility District number 1. And they signed a contract that Chevron had a contract with them that they turned over to Pacific International Terminals, which owns Gateway Pacific. They signed
a question for the panel.
To extend from 2015 to 2042 the delivery of 2 billion gallons of water a year to the Gateway Pacific Terminal to keep dust from the coal piles if it's built, and to stop spontaneous combustion. My question is simply whether they think there is a potential water shortage in Whatcom County. The director of the PUD does not, and whether they think that's a good investment of 2 billion gallons of water a year.
I think Kate has something to say about that.
Well, as the representative from the organization that's fighting the coal terminal on this panel, I should probably say what I know. So the PUD, last time, the Rome Grange did a great series of forums. The League has done a great series of forums. Now the Rome Grange is taking up that charge. And at their first forum, I had the opportunity to ask someone from the PUD how much their water right was, how much they were using, and ultimately I also got how much they had contracts for. Their right is equivalent to 54 million gallons per day. That is a lot of water. I don't know, that's a lot of swimming pools, is what I'm saying. Olympic size or otherwise. They currently use 14 million gallons per day, and they have contracts for 38 million, according to their representative on that panel. I don't remember his name. Roger, do you? Steve, thank you. Steve Joke. So, you know, my thought on this is that I focus mostly on water availability and the amount of water that we have. What we know is that we aren't meeting in-stream flows. Of course, there's a question.
I'm sorry, we are not. Or
we are not in a lot of cases. Some seasonally, some year-round. There are watersheds that are closed to new extractions. And granted, the PUD's pipe, where they suck the water out of the Nooksack River, is a bit further down the line. But if we aren't meeting in-stream flows, and they have right now, and they're only taking 14 million gallons, where are we going to be when they're taking all 54, if that ever occurs? So it's actually not even an answer to your question.
Well,
it's
well,
another
I think
question.
you're saying, simply put, in answer to his question, do we have enough water to meet what they're talking about in terms of the contract? And you're saying the simple answer is no.
Possibly not. And part of it, I want to qualify this a little bit too, because we don't have a lot of information. We have quite a bit of information about surface waters, but we don't have a lot of information about groundwater. The San Antonio example was one of the most outstanding ones to me. Granted, we're a completely different community. And I want to acknowledge that the cowboy hat wearing kayaker is a graduate of Western Washington University's Huxley College of the Environment. We were in school together. So they know their aquifer, they know how much water's in it, they have quantified that, they have an idea. We don't have that. And we're looking at it, we're moving in that direction. It's gonna take a lot of time. It is not an easy process to figure out how much groundwater you have and the connection it has. That's the most important thing, the connection it has to surface waters. And so those are things that we're gonna be learning over the coming years.
Actually, that was a great answer. Do we have another question from the audience? Yes?
What are some of the issues that, you know, perhaps connected with the movie that are coming up in the agricultural community that you're representing? And then also, what are some of the things that your group, the caucus, is working on, whether, well, I don't know, I guess what are some of the things you're working on?
Okay, thank you. I'll answer the second part first. Our coalition is only tasked with a mission to facilitate the formation of watershed improvement districts. Our group itself has no other agenda or mission and or projects as a group. Certainly there are projects that I think a lot of folks in our community realize there could be a lot of value to doing studies and starting to implement some of the solutions to, what would you say, identified problems. But I can't really speak any more to that particular issue. Now, as for connection with some of the issues in the movie, certainly access to water is a concern for us. Our agriculture that we have here does require a fair amount of supplemental irrigation for us to be viable with the crops that we are growing. That's usually just about a 3-month of the year window that ag really needs most of its water. But it's also the time, of course, when we're not getting the rainfall to fill the streams. So yeah, there are concerns with in-stream flows and hydraulic continuity, all of these things with groundwater and in-stream flows. Water quality issues are a big issue for us. I think agriculture impacts a lot of the community's water in a number of ways, and not all of those are good.
Well, at one of our forums, we learned that one of the conundrums faced by the agricultural community is that there's no benefit that the individual farmer faces or gets for conservation, because the bottom line is use it or lose it. And that's the overlay that creates a problem for the conservation-minded member of the agricultural community. If he doesn't use the water, he's going to lose the right. And so this sort of systemic change is one of the things that the community is looking at trying to change. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, that's correct, Jill. Certainly there are some provisions in regulation or policy that don't make a whole lot of sense for incentivizing better use of water, to minimize use of water, the way the laws are written, and that's unfortunate, and certainly efforts are being made to address that, hopefully in a positive way. That I think, I'm in berry crop production, and virtually all of our irrigation is via drip irrigation that really started coming into the main probably 15 to 20 years ago, and our industry has adopted that very quickly. Not, I would say, primarily for water conservation reasons, actually. It is better management for our farming that we want to be doing in the field, as opposed to making the whole field wet or inducing disease problems by making everything wet all the time, that we control where we place our water. And certainly there's a lot of efficiencies that come along with that aren't really recognized in a lot of ways.
What other questions do we have from the audience? Yes, please.
Yeah, I've got a question. The film had noted that the water district, I think it was in San Antonio, was incentivizing homeowners to implement some of these best management practices. Mr. Hutchings, you had mentioned that through the homeowner incentive program, that was the goal in the Lake Whatcom watershed. And Ms. Matthews, you'd mentioned that part of the issue that the city of Bellingham is having is meeting that demand in the summertime due to the algae with the water treatment process. And combining the homeowner incentive program, I know it's very focused in a specific area in the watershed, But has there been any discussion in the city departments to look at how they can expand that area to incentivize people elsewhere in the watershed that might not be in that area, seeing how it is an issue with meeting that demand? And you had mentioned the different departments working together. It seems that the water purveyor, the public works, and the stormwater division, how can they collude and open that incentive up to more people in the watershed?
Well, they certainly can. The reality is that in answer to an immediate problem like the shortage of water that induced the yard watering moratorium, or every other day, recognizes that there are some lower hanging fruit that are immediately available to us, right? So many of those other cities have already, for example, taken out lawns and replaced them with xeriscape. They've gone to great lengths to reduce the demand in the first place. And we in the city of Bellingham still have a lot of that gain available to us. That said, I think in the long term there is still a great interest in being able to export what we're learning in the Lake Whatcom watershed elsewhere in the city. And it's interesting because we're now just at a interesting juncture where the pilot project for that homeowner incentive program is coming to a close. So it's been, I think, 3 or 4 years of the city's involvement using state money to pilot this kind of approach is coming to a close, and the intent is for the city to propose to the county or to the city council to continue that using its own money, which means there are less strings attached to the city's money than there were to the grant monies from the state, opening the door for some more application, for some more, perhaps some more kinds of incentives that can be deployed. And so I think we'll see over the next, sort of the next generation, I call this the second generation of this homeowner retrofit program. We'll see how that all plays out, with the hopes that sometime in the future we'll be able to export that elsewhere.
Soon is the answer then.
Yes, soon.
But Colleen,
well, let me clarify, qualify that, because what I don't mean is that we should expect 2 years or 3 years from now to see those kinds of incentives offered citywide, because really the focus for now is directing the dollars at the Lake Whatcom watershed. But what we're finding in a number of different program areas, for example, there's an educational program that has been deployed in the watershed for a while, focusing on pet waste and those sorts of things, which cause fecal coliform water quality problems. Those kinds of programs are already being exported elsewhere, and I know there have recently been conversations with the Squalicum folks up and down the Squalicum Creek neighborhoods about that. And I know that some of some of our partners, including Resources, have been working on raising some homegrown community, neighborhood by neighborhood solutions to some of these problems and stormwater problems. And I expect through those kinds of activities, we'll see some other solutions, perhaps more attuned to individual neighborhoods, that come out of that. So I think there's a lot of optimism that over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, perhaps we'll see citywide kinds of solutions that you're talking about.
Colleen? Dr. Matthews?
And I have one thing to add. I don't actually have the technical information, but just because you're not aware of it, don't assume that nothing's happening. I go to a monthly meeting with, it's called the Lake Whatcom Data Management Meeting, and I'm always kind of stunned and humbled to find out how much work is going on. I know that there's been a multi-year program in the Silver Beach Creek drainage to improve that. That's a little stream that was identified as having a tiny, tiny fraction of the total water entering the lake, but a huge amount of the total phosphorus coming in relative to its flow. And there's been a lot of work on stabilizing the bank, on trying to work with individuals that live along there to improve the water quality and the coliform count. So It's really kind of remarkable, and I was just talking to the resources representative about the number of rain gardens that are going in that are targeting different areas. There's a tendency to think that if you don't actually see it in the newspaper or hear about it or something, that it's not happening. But there actually is an amazing amount of work that is going on. Definitely, there needs to be more. If there was enough going on, we wouldn't be having the water quality problems. But it's not a zero. There is a lot going on.
Kate has something to add also.
Well, since Jon was so good to bring up the work that we're doing in the community for community solutions to some of these problems, if you walked in the door, which you all did, you walked past our display table, and Lee first was there. Lee, could you raise your arm and wave? Lee is amazing. She's our pollution prevention specialist at Resources, and with her she has Hank. Where's Hank? There's Hank. And then there was someone else who I didn't know. Right there. So these folks are stormwater stewards, and we've started this program that actually started completely differently, but it's morphed into this stormwater steward thing where people sign up to take on their neighborhood and introduce neighbors to their storm drains and say, you know, this is your storm drain. This is where it goes. When you put stuff in here, it goes over there. And it causes all these problems. So it's about education, and it's amazing. Lee was able to get a group of students out to storm drains in the Columbia neighborhood, and they were labeling these storm drains, and they started yelling at cars driving by about pollution in your stormwater. And it was amazing. You know, once people learn about stormwater and how it travels through our community, you can't unlearn that. You can't, you know, not think about it when you're washing your car. You start driving it up onto the grass instead of washing it in the driveway or taking it to a place to have it done. It's important that we start thinking about these things, and that's part of the reason why Resources does these community-based efforts, and I appreciate Jon acknowledging that.
And Colleen, you have something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of echo the sentiment as far as, you know, people take their utilities for granted. They do. I mean, we expect to turn the faucet on, that water comes out and it's clean and it's good and it's not going to make us sick, and we expect to push the valve and that the toilet flushes away, and we don't really know or care where that goes, and that it just works, and no one really thinks about it until it doesn't work. And then whose fault is it, right? Not how do we fix it or what did we do to cause this problem, but who can fix it and who's going to pay for it. And we need to start thinking about it before it gets to that point and taking responsibility for it, you know, as it's happening and as it's occurring. And I think the State Department of Ecology, who has been partially funding the homeowner incentive program and other programs, they're looking at target areas that are either being impacted more than others or are on the verge of either being impacted too much that it's really expensive to bring them back, or, you know, target areas that can really use that funding to incentivize those types of strategies. And CJ, I know you're probably not the one that doesn't know where the water comes from. You think about that a little more than others. But, you know, I think just like Kate was saying, bringing things to light and connecting the dots for people. I think we just take things for granted so much, and to actually connect people to the systems around them and understand the impacts. I mean, farmers certainly understand if something goes wrong, it's their livelihood. It's not just that they can't flush their toilet and who's going to fix it. So, you know, it's something we all need to be aware of.
Well, Dr. Matthews, why was it Silver Beach? What was it about Silver Beach, and what was the problem, and then what solutions have they created?
Okay, Silver Beach is somewhat of an example of a typical, it's not just Silver Beach, but Silver Beach is a typical urban stream. And when I first started monitoring it, there were people that were composting, including dog poop, right, you know, over the fence, right in the little drainage to it. There's a lot of areas that had been kind of channelized or straightened and had very easily eroded banks, and a lot of impervious surfaces flowing into it, and the mystery drains that would open out and flow into it. Over the past 5 years, I think it's about 5 years now, the city has actually been doing creek walks. And identifying specific areas that are, for example, a homeowner that is maybe composting, has a compost pile that is too close to the creek and is going to drain into it. And so they'll work with that house. I mean, that's something that has came up in the film, and it's also come up in discussions, that you can have large-scale projects, but you can't forget the small scale. A lot of the pollution is generated small scale, and it needs to be addressed small scale. If you have one place where they have a compost bin that's draining into the creek, that's the place that you have to say, move your compost bin, not flyers up and down the creek. Similarly, there'll be places where maybe there's a stream, the stream bank needs to be restored and replanted and invasive species removed and replaced, or maybe done a little bit of temporary riprapping. And just, going up the stream, identifying specific areas that need work so that you minimize the amount of erosion, you minimize the amount of runoff that's coming in that's going to contain pollutants. And I can't give you all of the specifics because that was actually a city project. I wasn't involved with it, but I was quite impressed when I would see the reports that would come in about the amount of work that would go into it.
Well, this room is filled with concerned citizens. Let's say some of them live along a creek or want to know more about their drains. Who should they be calling, and what's the first thing they should be doing?
Well, they should be calling the stormwater hotline at the city. So before I get to that, it might be worth noting that there's another motivation behind choosing Silver Beach Creek. Despite the fact that it has quite a modest flow and was very polluted due to its urban nature, it also bisected a city-county line and allowed both jurisdictions to demonstrate their ability to work together in order to solve a ticklish urban water quality issue, and do so successfully, and then demonstrate to the rest of the folks who care about these issues that A, they're capable of working together, but B, the expenditure of tens of millions of dollars to make these kinds of improvements has value that can be measured in terms of improvements in water quality. That is, decreases in phosphorus loading into Lake Whatcom and decreases in fecal coliform bacteria that exist in the creek. And if you walk up Silver Beach Creek now, you will find, of course, a much restored-looking watershed that includes not only the physical structures that have been built along its course to infiltrate stormwater, these bioinfiltration facilities at Lottie Drive and up in Brownsville and those sorts of things. About $1.5 million worth of investment there on the part of Whatcom County in this case, but also just a much greater awareness of the kinds of local benefits that can be accomplished towards making those improvements. And
are there resources for the homeowner who wants to make sure that they're doing all that they can to be part of the solution? Is there someone that they can call or a program they can be connected with to make sure that their home is part of that solution?
So Resources has been around for about 30 years. So we've had various hotlines over time. But you can always call our number, 733-8307, and someone from the North Sound Baykeeper team or anyone, frankly, in that office is able to answer almost any question about waste reduction, water quality, anything. We've got a tremendous staff there with years and years of experience. Our North Sound Baykeeper, Wendy Stephenson, has been there for more than 10 years and has seen everything. Lee is a great wealth of information. So if you have any questions even tonight, she's going to be out at the booth again.
And Dr. Matthews, what do you think? If people want to be part of the solution in our community and they're looking at the lake and they want to make sure that they're doing all they can to help improve the health of the lake, what should they do or who should they call?
Well, I think we've got two very, very good sources. I would direct a question. Does anyone know what happened to the Watershed Pledge program?
Yeah.
I think we
Is it
used
still
to have
is it still there?
It's on slow burn at this point.
Okay. Reborn. Okay, so I'll say a little bit about the Watershed Pledge because I really liked it. That was my go-to answer when it was readily available. It was an online resource, and it was also a little booklet that listed all the things that people could do to keep their water clean. And you were invited to take a pledge, and at the time that it was actually active, if you took the pledge, you could get a little thing for your little sun catcher for your window or something. And it was applied not just to the Lake Whatcom watershed, it was also applied to some of the other watersheds in the community. It, like everything else, requires funding to keep going. And that's one of the things that I hope that they can resurrect, because those brochures were very nice for handing out to answer that exact question.
And, you know, just to Resources had that contract, I think, and we'd be willing and able to do that again. Just putting it out there.
Shameless plug right there.
No, I'm just saying.
But Colleen, please hold the mic for another second and tell us, tell the homeowners in this room if there is one thing that you would like to recommend that every homeowner take a look at, improve, or attend to in their homes to be better with their water. What would you be telling them to do?
Well, on the stormwater side of things, I would say actually find out where your downspouts are plumbed to and where they go, because a lot of people have no idea. A lot of times that at the base of your downspout, the pipe just goes underground, and who knows from there. It could go into the sanitary sewer, it could go out to a perforated pipe in your front yard, it could go straight to the storm main, it could be broken and full of stuff, who knows.
So take a look at our spouts.
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely. And if they are hard piped somewhere, it would be great to go, if you can find the information at the city, if they have as-built of your home, depending on when it was built, see if there's any information there, talk to your neighbors about how their downspouts are plumbed. A lot of times they're done similarly in different neighborhoods. If at all possible, disconnect them from tight lines. Of course, under the advice of an expert, knowing that you're not going to impact your neighbor's yard or something like that, or your neighbor's basement. But if at all possible, disconnect those from those tight-lined pipes and get them into landscape, and preferably native landscape or edible landscape. Those are always my first go-tos. And from just a water use standpoint, I think toilets are the easiest, lowest hanging fruit to replace and get lower flow fixtures. I think that's a huge waste of water, and if at all possible, replacing toilet fixtures, shower heads, washing machines, dishwashers with lower flow fixtures. I think that helps from the water demand standpoint, it helps from the wastewater generation standpoint, and it just makes us all use our water more wisely.
A question from Suzanne.
I mean, none of these issues are brand new. None of these issues to the city of Bellingham, and the city of Bellingham, I know for sure, has been working on it for at least 14 years, because 14 years ago we started creating television and video programming about these very topics: in-stream flows, LID, green roofs, impervious surfaces. We documented the first impervious pavement to be poured in the city of Bellingham. These are not new issues, and it's really dismaying to me to see that we're talking about these issues again as if they're brand new to us, when we as a community have been talking about it in different places for quite some time. And maybe a piece of that dismay comes from, I'm not certain that we are ahead of this. Are we better off today than we were 14 years ago when we started talking about this stuff?
All right, well, that's a
Well, related to Lake Whatcom, I will ask Dr. Matthews to weigh in on this. But let me tell you that from my perspective, the answer is resoundingly yes. And I say that because the city has invested a tremendous amount of money in replacing, for example, impervious streets along North Shore Drive in the Lake Whatcom watershed with pervious solutions. There have been, just this summer you will see a program for developing rain gardens in the central business district. So there will be quite a number of those popping up, somewhere on the order of 13 or something like that, at strategically located places in the central business district. There is on the docket a program that will focus in 2015 on retrofitting the Roosevelt neighborhood. Much of the aging stormwater system there needs to be replaced, and that replacement, as you saw in the movie, allows opportunity to include bioinfiltration, those sorts of solutions. The same thing will follow in 2016 in the Columbia neighborhood, I believe. And those are just a couple of examples. There are many, many, many examples of improvements along the lines of what you just witnessed in the city of Bellingham. And I think one of the more important of which are some 84 at this point successful incentive investments in individual residential retrofits. That was the number that included 2 schools in the lake, or one in the Lake Whatcom watershed, and I'm not sure where which other school participated. Includes 2 schools.
So we're moving along.
We're
in the
moving
city.
along.
And how about in the county?
John, are we seeing the numbers going down?
I'm going to defer that question relative to Lake Whatcom to
But before we
Robin.
get to Dr. Matthews, and we have a lot of people to hear from, and we're getting close to wrapping up. But Randy, in the county, you said that things are improving. Can you give us 1 or 2 quick examples of that?
Improving in what way?
Water quality, people being better stewards of their water.
Well, I think, honestly, there are some people that are being better stewards, and there are some that are not. Honestly, I don't see an across-the-board recognition by farmers that what they're doing does have impact to the larger community.
Is it a question of education or of will? People know better and they're refusing to do it, or they just don't know to do better?
Oh, it's probably a combination of that. Honestly, it is both. Will is a part of it. I really see agriculture in this county is in a place right now of struggling to come to grips with the reality that they are just not out there doing what they do, and it really doesn't matter to anybody else. It's not like when I was a young boy growing up on the farm, where everybody had their smaller farm and they did whatever they wanted, and there was at least virtually no impact to the neighbors. I don't think that was totally true, but really the type of farming, the scale of farming has changed, and our community has changed in terms of how many people live here and live their lives and build things here. I see agriculture needing to come to grips with the fact that they are a part of a larger community, and I don't think that's something that a fair amount of farmers really understand or want to understand.
Well, I can't let the conversation end on that note. I have to ask Dr. Matthews. We have some optimism with the lake, don't we?
We have some optimism.
Thank you.
First of all, we're not done, okay? 14 years ago, I was still trying to convince people that there was a problem. I was starting to get really worried. I was seeing the indicators of change in the lake going up and up and up. And every year I would have to reset my figures, and I'd have to use bigger and wider and taller and higher graphs to plot what was happening. For the last 6 years, these indicators have been flat. Now, I am very conservative when it comes to talking about trends, and so I don't know that we have leveled out. We are certainly not better. I would say that after 6 years, I'm starting to think that probably we've leveled. And what that means is that we now know where we have to get from. I talk about it's a little bit like kicking a ball, and how hard you kick it, that's how far you have to run to catch it and pull it back. We are under a legal obligation to pull it back. And we have a total daily maximum load for phosphorus loading for the lake that has a nice long time frame. It took a long time to see the effects that were present in the lake in 15 and 20 years. I've actually been studying it almost 30 years. It's taken a long time to see change. It's going to take a long time, unfortunately, a long time to see improvement. But what I'm guardedly optimistic about is that these indicators have stopped going up every year. I haven't had to reset the figures on my graphs for 6 years. Things are starting to stay about level. They're still bouncing all over the place.
Guardedly optimistic.
Guardedly optimistic.
I'm calling that a night. I'm sorry, but we're at the end of our time. We know that we could talk all night and that all of you who are here have questions. To get more answers, I'm going to urge you, those of you who aren't members of the League, to join the League of Women Voters, to connect with our partners this evening, which are Sustainable Connections and with Resources, and to join me, please, with a round of applause in thanking our panelists.